This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Appeal for international assistance after explosions hit Equatorial Guinea, killing dozens. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has outlined the country's diplomatic relations with other countries. What's in it for Africa? And International Women's Day being marked amid increased hardships for women. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at the stories coming up this hour. Egypt accelerates women empowerment efforts. In sports, North American sporting imports led by basketball command huge following in South Africa. Let's begin the hour in Equatorial Guinea, where authorities are appealing for international assistance after a series of powerful explosions. The blasts at a military base in the city of Bata have left at least 20 dead and some 600 others injured. The presidency says the incident occurred as a result of negligence related to the storage of explosives, dynamite and ammunition at the camp.
Almost all houses and buildings in the city of Bata in Equatorial Guinea have been affected by a series of explosions at a military barracks. The Defense Ministry released a statement saying that the tragedy was caused by a fire in a weapons depot. President Theodore Obiangema has called for investigations into the incident. He also appealed for help from the international community to rebuild parts of Bata.
The situation in the city of Bata, where there were a couple of blasts, has caused loss of several human lives and substantial material damage. The preliminary information we have is that there are 500 injured and 15 deaths. The blast happened near a military base in Bata. The most important thing for us in this meeting is to ask for help for Equatorial Guinea from friendly nations and international partners in this unfortunate situation. You are aware that we are facing a health emergency, and now on top of that, this new tragedy in the city of Bata. This is why we thought it is appropriate to inform you this way, so that you can sincerely help Equatorial Guinea.
Survivors, many of whom were said to be children, were rushed to a local hospital for treatment. The disaster comes at a time when Equatorial Guinea is reeling from the economic effects of the coronavirus pandemic and a drop in the price of crude oil. The nation relies on oil production for a large part of its state revenue. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Let's now bring in David Oto-Endley, an international defense and security analyst. He's also the Director of Security for the Horn of Africa Institute for Peace and Security. David, it's a pleasure to talk with you this afternoon. Do we know what exactly happened in Equatorial Guinea or what caused the blasts?
Thank you very much. The investigations on what really caused this blast is still ongoing. But Peninah, I think this is an unprecedented blast, looking at the images and the videos that have come out from Bata, which is the economic capital of Equatorial Guinea. And, you know, it sounds to me or looks to me as though this is the new ground zero, reminding everyone of the 9/11 attacks. But of course, this is not terror related. This has been caused, according to what the president has said, by the wrong handling or the wrong storage, you know, of explosives and dynamite, you know, in one of the military camps in Kwa Toma, which is in Mondong. Again, you know, this is an area that hosts more than half of the population of Equatorial Guinea. And as we can see by early reports, more than 600 people are wounded. And the number of people that have been killed, you know, of course, they say it is about 20, but that is still very early. So I think, you know, what has happened here, according to the preliminary reports we are getting, is that the blast was caused by farmers who had lit the area, you know, for some reason, maybe to burn some local woods or something like that. So it is gross negligence if that were to be the final findings, and the government will be devastated.
Right.
To understand that, this kind of event can happen at this point in time.
Gross negligence indeed, David. So how can such incidents be avoided in future?
Each country has to have what we call in security a CBRNE structure, which is to do with chemical, biological, nuclear, and explosive device, storage and maintenance capability. Equatorial Guinea is a very rich country, despite its limited population. It should be able to have a very robust structure in terms of how it stores its materials, especially explosives. And I think that, a serious investigation should be carried out on how this, managed to happen at this point in time. That would be the first line of action to avoid any future occurrence of such a massive blast.
Right. David Otu-Endley, thank you very much for joining us. Libya's city of Sirte is hosting a parliamentary session where lawmakers will decide if they will endorse an interim government. At least 100 members of parliament must vote for interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah's proposed cabinet as required by the United Nations before he can officially take up his role. For more on the Libya Unity Government vote, we are joined by Bassem Ali, editor at Ahram Online in Cairo. Bassem, thank you for joining us. How significant is that meeting in Sirte?
This meeting is too significant to the extent that if they manage to reach consensus on the Unity Cabinet and approve it, we can happily celebrate the end of the Libyan civil war, which has been in place for almost a decade. If not, that means that more talks need to take place, more diplomacy and more negotiations between the political forces on how the shape of the new government would look like, how the new government how its structure would be portrayed. So this is key to the transitional phase in Libya, and I think everyone sitting on the table today knows that the consequences would not be fortunate if they ended their meetings without having an agreement on the new Libyan cabinet.
So this is a very significant meeting indeed, Bassem. So what are some of the challenges of the incoming administration, which is expected to oversee elections in December?
Three main challenges, in fact. On the one hand, you have the political challenges, which mainly involve achieving a common ground between all political forces throughout the coming few months on all issues that would be at stake. The second kind of challenges is the security challenges, which entail making sure that all parties to the Libyan conflict, whether the LNA, the GNA, or others, are satisfied in a manner that the trust would be built among them, and that none of them is considering a return to the conflict in the future. The third kind of challenges, which I think comes on top of the list, is the social and economic challenges: unemployment, poverty, a migration crisis that remains in place, and a number of economic challenges that without solving them, Libya would spend the few coming years, in fact, in deep troubles. To sum it up, the money, the financial issues needs to be settled, the security situation needs to be controlled, and a consensus among the political parties and forces needs to be established. If the transitional government manages to successfully fulfill these objectives, we can peacefully and safely reach December with elections and a new transfer of power to constant authorities in Libya.
All right, Bassem Ali, live for us in Cairo. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, China has been instrumental in helping many African countries contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China is committed to bringing African economies back on track, and the China-Africa cooperation is among the country's top priorities.
China-Africa cooperation stands as a model of South-South cooperation and a fine example of international cooperation with Africa. To help African countries fight the pandemic and bring the economy back on track is a top priority for China-Africa cooperation. Last year, President Xi Jinping initiated and hosted the extraordinary China-Africa Summit on Solidarity and announced a host of new support measures. We've provided close to 120 batches of emergency supplies to Africa and sent medical expert teams to 15 African countries. We have started to provide COVID vaccines to 35 African countries and the AU Commission. The construction of the Africa CDC headquarters, a project for which we are glad to provide assistance, has started, and cooperation between 30 pairs of Chinese and African hospitals is well underway.
And joining me now is Langa Madonko, an economist and also the founder of co-founder of Summit Africa. He joins us from Johannesburg. Thank you very much, Langa, for your time. One of the issues Foreign Minister Wang Yi mentioned in his address is economic globalization in Africa. And indeed, both China and Africa have embraced it over the years. How has this benefited the continent?
I think the continent has somewhat benefited from the relationships that it has had with China and the rest of the world in terms of how that has stimulated trade and boosted our ability to export some of our commodities there. I think we noticed, for example, in the previous commodity super cycles, Africa was a big beneficiary as the world took up a lot of its resources. But I think to some extent, we also have lagged behind in the fact that we have not been able to take full advantage of the economic opportunity by not selling to the developed world what would be processed and beneficiated goods, and instead have rather sold raw material. I think we've also benefited from some of the trade and bilateral and multilateral agreements that have been struck with countries such as China in terms of giving preferential trading terms to African countries. And I think the minister was right to say that both Africa and China have fully embraced globalization and global trade. And it is something that is of key significance to how we do business on the continent.
So globalization comes with its challenges. How can Africa make globalization work?
So I think the free trade area that has been established should be one of the catalysts for Africa taking advantage in full of globalization. I think we need to start thinking about Africa not as a homogeneous area, but also as a place where we can create hubs and centers of economic activity, where we can start to take advantage of the vast resources that we have and also take advantage of the population demographic that we have to start to position ourselves to gain the most out of the export of Africa's resources as well as its talent, to ensure that we're extracting as much value from international trade as we can, which we may not and have not done historically.
And what should African countries do to maximize the beneficial aspects of their ties with China?
I think China will continue to be a big market and will continue to be significant in the way future trade continues to happen. I think, however, we need to be revisiting the terms on which we are dealing with China. And also we need to be revisiting what products we are selling to China. Yes, China is a mass producer and we are a producer of raw materials, but we need to be finding that middle ground where Africa can also start to produce some of the commodities in a more beneficiated manner for the international market rather than just selling raw materials. I think we also need to have frank conversations with China about the quality of product that is imported from China into Africa, so that we are working on terms that are mutually beneficial.
Langa Madonko in Johannesburg, thank you very much for joining us. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up, the International Women's Day being marked amid increased hardships for women. And the UK discussing deep cuts in assistance to Africa and the Middle East. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Nigeria.
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Today marks the World International Women's Day. It's a time to celebrate women's achievements and reflect on the struggles to realize women's rights across the world. In Africa, the continent has recorded significant progress in pushing for change. This year, it celebrates one of its own, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as the Director General of the World Trade Organization. The 66-year-old is the first woman and the first African to occupy the position. The Harvard-educated development economist hails from Nigeria. Her position at the financial institution has inspired many women on the continent to take up global leadership roles. And despite such achievements, studies show that Africa still lags behind other regions on progress towards gender parity. We spoke to Dr. Wanjiru Kamau-Rotenberg about how the continent can forge a gender-equal region. She is the director at African Women in Agricultural Research and Development.
COVID has indeed actually probably is shaping the ways that we are marking this year's International Women's Day. And with the benefit of almost 1 year of being in a pandemic, we have also been able to see some of the ways that this pandemic has had seriously gendered impacts on our societies. When you look at, for example, the number of women, we know that it is proportionately more women have lost their jobs during COVID because of where women, the industries where women tend to be clustered around, the care industry around, when you think about hotels and in restaurants and the kinds of institutions that shut down, tend to heavily employ women. We also then know that women represent a majority of our nursing staff. The people who are at the front lines trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us healthy, have mostly been women. And so there's been an impact there. And then in the agricultural sector where I work and where my work at Award is located, we know that COVID and this pandemic has exacerbated, has made worse the challenges that and the gender gaps that have been existing in the agricultural sector. We know that women are overrepresented when it comes to agricultural production, but underrepresented when it comes to more higher value parts of the agricultural value chains. And this pandemic has made those inequalities that much worse when you have lockdowns that make it difficult to move food from rural spaces where it is produced into urban spaces where it is urgently needed, when you have mothers unable to feed their children in urban spaces because the food that they rely on, I mean, much needed food, isn't making it into cities, or is making it into cities at much higher prices, yet a lot of women have lost their jobs. So it's an important day to mark, but I think it's also one that we mark recognizing the amount of work that is yet to go, that we have yet to do.
Now, as the world celebrates women's achievements, women in the Democratic Republic of Congo contribute significantly to the country's labor force, but they are largely underrepresented at formal employment and decision-making levels. But a group of women based in the capital, Kinshasa, is determined to change that. The group has been mentoring women in politics and entrepreneurship to get the skill sets required to compete in the male-dominated job market. CGTN's Chris Ochambringa has more from Kinshasa.
Matondo Kinkosi hits the road very early to buy bread at a bakery on the outskirts of DRC's capital, Kinshasa. She's been selling bread for 4 decades. The mother of 6 is also the breadwinner of her family.
We women face a lot of difficulties. I wake up at 3 every morning to sell bread so that my children can get their basic necessities. I'm not going out to steal or get handouts because I believe in earning from my sweat.
Matondo is one among millions of Congolese women who are struggling to support their families. The ongoing conflict across the country has exposed them to sexual exploitation and abuse, but there's also discrimination of women in formal employment. A movement of educated Congolese women is taking the initiative to train women entrepreneurs to excel in the job market. Nefertiti Chibanda is the vice president of the International Movement of the Dynamic Women of Africa, MIFDA.
As women, we have that responsibility. We take it as responsibility to work twice as hard, maybe to be recognized half as much as men. We are aware of that. We are aware of that. That's why when we work and we conduct ourselves very seriously. We pay attention to details and we try to remain focused on what's essential.
She has mentored women in the DRC and other parts of the world. And now, more Congolese women are demanding equal opportunities with men.
Si la femme continuera à subir, tant mieux qu'elle soit active.
If women continue undergoing discrimination in our country, we won't develop. We must be active actresses in all programs. UN projects and government jobs should all have women.
The DRC has ratified international conventions that require 30% of national offices to be filled by women, but that's still far from being achieved.
When I look at our government, I wonder why they mostly appoint women to be vice officials and not senior managers. I'm totally against that.
DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has vowed to promote the rights of women and ensure they get fair access to available opportunities. The DRC government has made some progress in improving women's rights in the provinces where peace has prevailed over the past decade. But the situation of women in the conflict-prone areas of eastern DRC is quite worrying. Many of them have been raped and forced to flee to neighboring countries by rebels fighting over land, power, and the control of mineral resources. Chris Ochambringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The UK government is planning to cut aid program budgets by more than half for various conflict-ridden countries around the world. This is according to a leaked report of deliberations between Foreign Office officials. Affected African countries include Somalia, South Sudan, Libya, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. UK officials did not directly comment on the move, but stated that the coronavirus pandemic has forced them to take on tough decisions involving the amount spent on aid. The UK aid program over 2 years is based a cut from $20 billion to nearly $14 billion. There has been widespread condemnation over the plans. Sam Nadal joins us live from London. He is the acting head of policy and advocacy at Oxfam. Sam, thank you for your time. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has described the overall cut in the UN's aid program this year as a death sentence. How is this likely to impact operations?
I think these cuts will be hugely damaging. As you said, the Secretary General called this a death sentence. Another UN official described this as an act of medium and long-term self-harm. So I think what's so disappointing about this is that the UK enshrined in law, it was one of the first countries to do so, a commitment to 0.7% of its national income on international aid. And this was a proud commitment of solidarity with the world's poorest people. So we know how urgent the situation is with the pandemic. Humanitarian needs are rising, and these aid cuts quite simply will lead to loss of life. They'll lead to increased humanitarian need, and some are predicting that tens of thousands of otherwise preventable deaths will occur.
Now, most of the countries are poor, already struggling with the impacts of COVID-19. What are some of the long-term consequences of such a move?
Well, we know that the UK is currently the second largest donor of international aid, so this is going to have a major impact. We're talking about a cut of around £4 to £5 billion. And if the reports are to be believed, these cuts, unfortunately, are going to fall in some of the worst conflict zones and the places facing the highest levels of fragility in the world, whether that's Syria, South Sudan, or elsewhere. And we're not going to see as deep cuts to programs to, for example, science and research or economic development. That's really important work, but we know how urgent, from our work as Oxfam we know how urgent it is to make sure that people in the most urgent need are able to receive the aid that they require.
So if the UK does indeed pull through with these plans, Sam, are there any contingency plans to bridge that gap?
Well, this is the really worrying thing. We're seeing donor governments, rich countries cutting their aid budgets around the world, and it is going to have a real world impact and it's going to cost lives. So yes, we want to, the important thing really to note is that it isn't too late to reverse these cuts. Here in the UK, we're campaigning, raising awareness and trying to get MPs in our parliament, for example, to call on the government to reverse these damaging cuts. The 0.7% commitment of aid budget was made in the best of times. And as we've heard from the Archbishop of Canterbury here in the UK, what's so galling about these moves is that the promise is now being broken in the worst of times when people need it most. And we're really not talking about, in the scheme of things, a huge amount of money. We've seen countries fork out trillions in support of their own populations. Totally understandable that they're doing so. Whereas the UK government's cutting around £100 million to Yemen, for example. That's not going to relieve much fiscal pressure on the exchequer here in the UK, but that money will make a huge difference to the people of Yemen, to the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo and elsewhere.
All right, Sam, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us. Sam Nadal, live for us in the UK. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Egypt accelerates women empowerment efforts. We'll tell you more.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In July 2020, Egypt became the first Middle East and North African country to launch the Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator. This marked an important step in the ongoing efforts by Cairo and the World Economic Forum to empower women economically. Yasser Hakim takes a look at what has been achieved so far through that initiative.
Several steps have been taken by the Egyptian government to empower women economically since the launch of the Gender Gap Accelerator last July. It includes more women taking leadership positions in private and public sector banks and companies, as well as supporting women-led SMEs.
This project is addressing to a large extent a major problem regarding the participation of Egyptian women in economic activities. Women in the cities and the educated women, they are doing quite well regarding their participation in labor market, but still these are minimal compared to the majority of women that are in rural areas, in the slums.
Although females make up half of the country's population, official statistics show they only account for 21% of the workforce.
Egyptian women are confronting severe problems regarding their participation in the labor market, the traditions, and sometimes they prefer to be married, and sometimes, their husbands refused for them to go to the labor market. Other social problems confronting families, Egyptian families, specifically in the slum areas and the rural areas. Illiteracy rate for women is high. The type of education they are taking in technical schools quite, weak and modest, and cannot enable women to, go to the labor market and to find opportunities that can, help them to survive and to have a good quality of life.
The government says it's addressing these issues. The Ministry of International Cooperation has set aside 13% of its funding for women's economic empowerment programs, and another $3.3 billion from the World Bank to close the gender gap in the education and health sectors. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The motor vehicle market in South Africa is slowly gaining traction. The market suffered a massive blow last year when all activity was abruptly halted due to the COVID-19 lockdown. Car sales declined to almost 30% in 2020. Exports also suffered a massive decline. But as Sumitra Naidu reports, the market is showing signs of a slow recovery.
The motor industry reopened last year after almost 5 months of being in a hard lockdown. But it reopened to an even weaker economy, staggered activity and heavily indebted consumers.
The South African automotive industry was impacted negatively by COVID-19. We've seen a 30% decline in terms of our exports, because South Africa is a major exporting country now. We export vehicles now to 151 different countries around the world, because 64% of what we are producing in South Africa goes out of the country as exports. And unfortunately, we're not able to export as many vehicles as we did in 2020.
Overall, new vehicle sales declined 13.3% in Feb, while exports fell 8%. It's a much smaller decline than last year, suggesting the market is improving, albeit at a slower pace. The export market is crucial as it makes up over 50% of all vehicle production in South Africa.
Since the market reopened, it was quite a slow start. During the first few months, it started picking up towards the end of the year, and then the start of this year, it's been a little bit slow, but certainly a slight improvement over when we actually came out of lockdown. So the market has operated a little bit better than we actually expected.
South Africa remains an attractive destination for motor manufacturers. Last month, Ford Motor Company announced further investment in factories to manufacture its new vehicles. The industry is one of the largest employers in South Africa and contributes around 14% to GDP.
And we're hoping that 2021 will definitely improve compared to what we've seen in 2020. And primarily also where the economy is opening up much wider. And it obviously affords a lot of people to can be able to go out and make those important investment decisions in terms of buying new cars and so on, so that we can be able to see some activity.
With more economies slowly ramping up activity, global demand is expected to rise. The motor industry in South Africa is confident there will be a strong rebound. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Citibank Kenya has established a supply chain finance program in support of women-owned businesses. The bank's chief executive officer and East Africa cluster head Martin Mugambi says under the program, the institution provides the women-owned businesses with working capital to enable them conduct business with corporate clients. He reiterated that the bank had concluded an over $2.7 million inclusive financing facility under a smart partnership with 4G Capital. The fund is set to support 25,000 small and medium enterprises in Kenya.
Not only do we provide them financing to ensure that they're empowered to do business, but we've actually held specific sessions and for specific customers for this supply chain finance program. What we're also trying to do is make sure that we identify these women early, we get them into part of our procurement process here in the bank, so that as we procure services, goods and services, we are also targeting women-owned businesses. But what I will tell you, we are trying to at least increase this number to 40% of our supply chain.
Urban shoppers in Tanzania are moving away from more traditional forms of retail buying and opting for contact-free and digital transactions. A study published by MasterCard shows that 72% of Tanzanians have been spending more money online since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Daniel Kijo brings us to speed on this growth from Tanzania's commercial capital of Dar es Salaam.
Piki is Tanzania's leading e-commerce platform. The food delivery app was founded in 2019 and is part of the country's recent e-commerce market boom. It handles over 1,000 orders a day, employs 100 riders, and operates in 3 regions.
A lot of customers trust Piki. They order every day. They order maybe 3 times a day because we are reliable, we are fast, and we meet those expectations that they have.
Jumia, Africa's leading online retailer, known as the Amazon of Africa, shut down its operations in Tanzania in November of 2019. It claimed the country's e-commerce market was too small. Ibrahim Dunguru, a digital marketing expert, says a lot has changed since Jumia left Tanzania's e-commerce rat race.
Ilikuwa ni ngumu kwa sababu watu wengi walikuwa hawezi kutumia email.
It used to be hard because people didn't know how to use emails, navigate websites, etc. But now it's easy because a person can just download an app or get on social media like Instagram and Facebook. So what has helped create usage is social media. These are easier to use.
E-commerce ambayo ilikuwa inafanyika miaka nyuma kama email.
Since COVID-19 hit Tanzania and limited movement, multiple e-commerce platforms have sprung up. Payment for online purchases is made using mobile money, removing the need for physical shopping. With its 27 million internet users, Tanzania is the 4th largest e-commerce consumer base in Africa, second only to Kenya. And with a population of 60 million, there's lots of room for growth. With COVID-19, the role e-commerce platform played in the lives of local businesses changed almost overnight. Emmanuel says the potential for growth is massive.
The plan for Piki is to become a super app where most of the services that customer needs on a daily basis will be available. So beyond food, beyond maybe electronic delivery, so things like services and those kind of things will also be available. Services, transportation, and those kind of services.
Cash on delivery remains Tanzania's preferred method of payment. Experts say it's still unclear how consumer behavior will change in the country. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break, still plenty to come, including this. As countries in Africa begin mass vaccination, we take a look at the vaccination rollout in Egypt.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
"24 African nations have laid the groundwork for COVID-19 vaccine shipments. Seychelles, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Mozambique and South Africa are some of the countries that have already started vaccinating their populations. So far, about 200 million doses of vaccines have been administered. However, close to 100 countries have not begun inoculating parts of their populations. Egypt is among African countries that have already begun vaccinating its population. It's now expanded its COVID-19 rollout to include members of the public after weeks of inoculating healthcare workers. However, it's only older adults and people with chronic diseases who are eligible to receive the vaccine at this stage of the exercise. The government has selected 40 medical centers nationwide for the inoculation drive. Here's CGTN's Adel Mahri with more details.
67-year-old Mohammed Abu Bakr provides documents proving his identity and medical conditions to healthcare workers immunizing people. He's among the first Egyptians to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. After confirming his appointment, the health worker sends him for a medical checkup before he gets the jab.
My daughter applied for me on Thursday. By Friday, I got a message saying my vaccine appointment was on Saturday. I didn't expect it would be that fast. I thought I would have to wait for a week at least. I didn't hesitate to get the vaccine. I could not get infected by the end of the day. So, why not get the protection from the disease? It's the wise thing to do.
The government is vaccinating people against COVID-19 at 40 of its public health centers. Interested citizens can either apply through the Health Ministry's website or by calling a vaccination hotline.
Citizens eligible to take the COVID-19 vaccine are the most vulnerable to the disease, either because of their age or their chronic disease. So to avoid their interaction with the scores who come to this public health center, an entire floor has been dedicated for COVID-19 vaccination. All other healthcare services have been relocated to different floors and other entrances.
After getting the jab, Makram Shinoda has to rest for 15 minutes before heading back home. It's a precautionary step in case he showed any adverse reactions or allergies to the vaccine. The 55-year-old has multiple medical conditions, and getting the vaccine has been a huge relief for him.
I have high blood pressure, diabetes, heart and kidney conditions.
Thank God, it's a blessing. I live with blessings. Without these, I wouldn't be a priority for the COVID-19 vaccine. I thought the center would be very crowded. Everyone wants a vaccine. I found the process very well organized. I thank China for sending us the vaccines. I respect the Chinese people for supporting us.
2,200 Egyptians got the vaccine in the first 2 days. Tens of millions of residents can apply to get inoculated in the first stage of the vaccination campaign. During the first week of registration, though, only 189,000 applied for the jab. Priority will be given to the elderly and people with the most severe chronic conditions among those who registered. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in sports. North American sporting imports led by basketball command huge following in South Africa.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the track.